All right. Well, good evening. My name is Christopher. I will be your host this evening. We'll give it a few more minutes for some people to get signed on, but if you could take a moment and get signed in, that would help me greatly. You can either scan the QR code that is on your screen or go to the address that's on there and get signed in. So I will come back on in just a moment. All right, it is 6 o'clock. We will get started in 1 minute. Well, good evening, Ryan. Welcome. If you could take a moment and get signed in, you can either scan the QR code or go to the link on there, and then we will go ahead and get started here in about 15 seconds. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I can't see anyone. So if somebody could come off mute, make sure and tell me whether they can see my screen just fine and whether you can hear me just fine.
Yeah, I can in here.
I don't hear anybody. Hang on.
Yes, can hear you.
It might be me.
We can hear and see. Are you able to hear us?
Just 1 second. All right. Does someone want to speak and see if I can hear you now?
Can you hear us now?
I can see you, Ryan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I don't know why I can't hear anybody. Hold on. This isn't going to be good if I can't hear you. Sorry, give me just 1 second. All right, now speak, Ryan. See if I can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you. Perfect. All right, sorry about that. Technology isn't always my friend, but usually it is. All right, so we'll welcome everyone, and I'll get to introductions here in just a moment. But I just want to kind of talk through real quick. The purpose of this session is that Century 21 Sheets wants to help you pass your real estate exam. We will give you a brief overview of Century 21 Sheets. Ultimately, we want you to know that we're a resource for new agents. We'll talk through some test taking tips. And I always give the disclaimer that this is geared towards the Indiana real estate exam, because we are going to talk through some state specific questions that are not the same in each state. So, and I did see a couple of people that had signed up, had stated that they were not looking to take the Indiana real estate exam, so this wouldn't apply to them. I haven't seen any of them join yet, so we'll see how many other people join. Right now, there are 3 of you that are on. I think 20 had signed up, so we'll probably have a few more, but we will go on because you are here. All right, well, here's me. My name is Christopher Porter. I am the sales manager in our Avon office. First and foremost, I'm a realtor, and then I'm also now the director of training for Century 21 Sheets. I've been prior to real estate, and I've been in real estate about 3.5 years now. Prior to real estate, I spent 21 years in restaurant management, and anything from casual dining to fine dining. So, the transition's been good because real estate is really about people. And so are restaurants. And people always think restaurants are about food. Ultimately, it's a people business, and so is real estate. My contact information is on there. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Some other people that might be joining us, Andrew Huber, he is our Director of New Agent Growth. His contact information is there. It's Andrew at c2onsheets.com, and his phone number as well. If you have not spoken with us and would like to, we would love the opportunity to talk to you about Century 21 Sheets and what we offer to agents. So feel free, again, you can either reach out to myself or reach out to Andrew, because again, he does this for all of our offices. And then Todd Callan may or may not join us tonight. I think he said he may not join, but he's a loan officer with Milestone Home Lending. Now we own Milestone, but he works here in my office pretty much every day. He's been in real estate for, I think, 36 years. He's started off as an agent, then was an appraiser, and he's now a loan officer. So he's a great resource to have. And, as you get into real estate, you want to know those partners that you can count on for information, even if it's not a deal that they're working on. So Todd's a great resource for that. And then I'm actually still at the office. I'm not at home yet. That's my dog. Usually when I do this, a lot of times in the evenings, I am at home, and he does sometimes bark, but he's not here, so we won't have that issue. All right, this is more fun if everyone participates. So I do ask for cameras on. Come off mute to ask questions. And please do participate. Again, it makes it much more fun when you participate. And also know that no question is a dumb question. All right, so real quick, that was a little bit about me. So I'm going to have each of you just introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit about you real quick. And Ryan, we will start with you.
My name is Ryan Fuquay. I am from Bloomington, Indiana. The Century 21 Sheets office that I'm looking at is Bloomington. But I also grew up on the west side of Indianapolis.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time in Avon. So a secondary market that I've looked at is that west side.
Okay.
Of Indianapolis and Avon, Plainfield area.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I've got one of my agents actually lives in Quincy, and she's like, it's kind of, equal distance for me to get to Bloomington or to Avon. So she works out of this office. Right. So cool. Well, very nice to meet you. Laura, how about you?
Hi, I'm Laura Edwards. I am from Fishers originally.
Okay.
My husband and I live in Indianapolis. We're in the Lawrence-Geist area, and I am considering the Fishers Century 21 Sheets.
Okay, perfect. Well, Dan's a great guy. Dan manages that office. Yeah, he's great.
I haven't had a chance to meet him yet, but I've met Marcy.
Okay.
Julie Downey is a close family friend.
Yeah.
So that's how I was connected through Century 21.
Gotcha. Yeah. Julie's fabulous. So Julie, obviously, if you know her, she knows she's our coach. So she does a lot with agent growth. So she and I kind of work in the same kind of field. I tend to work with the newer agents, and she tends to work with, more experienced agents, but a lot of what she does, she teaches to the new agents as well. So I love Julie. We work really well together.
Yeah, she's a great resource. I took my classes back in November.
Okay.
And had a little bit of a hiatus, and now I'm refocusing in and trying to get through the exam.
Well, great. Well, we're glad to have you. And Kel?
Sorry, I was outside with my daughter. My name is Shaquille. Sorry, I've kind of been in and out.
That's okay.
I'm currently I currently work for the Marion County Prosecutor's Office as a victim advocate for children that have been like sexually assaulted or they witnessed homicides. I've started my courses. I actually just finished my course, got my certificate the beginning of this month, and I'm scheduled to take my test on Thursday.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just really excited. I went through, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Indiana Real Estate Institution out south.
Yep.
But that's where I went. Great instructor Brian Lee.
Is that Brian Lee? Yeah. So someone else that was in
Yep, Brian.
actually, yeah, somebody I was just interviewing earlier. She was in she was in Brian's classes too. So
Awesome. He's a great instructor. So I'm very
He really
excited
is.
and kind of anxious and nervous at the same time to take this test, but I'm ready.
All right. Well, good. All right. Well, let's see. What's my next slide? So let's talk through some test taking tips. First, if you don't have a date scheduled, I always tell people to schedule one now. And here's why. It gives you something to work towards. Because if you just say, well, I'm going to in a few months, you probably won't. That's just how it works. But again, it gives you something to kind of work towards. And I always tell people this, the closer to when you finish your class that you can take the test, the better, because then you won't start forgetting some things because, you don't use it every day. And so you might forget. Now, when you're taking the test, always trust your gut. Your gut is almost always right. When you start second guessing yourself is when you start taking answers that were correct and making them into incorrect ones. Now math, and I forget the exact number. I think that's on average about 5 math questions on the exam. And for some people, math questions cause them anxiety. So I tell people you'll either A, do them all first or do them all last. And here is not a popular opinion on things, but at the end of the day, if you don't know it, just guess, because you could fail every single math question on there. And as long as you pass the other ones, you're still going to pass the test. So don't let that bog you down too much. We will do and talk through a couple of math questions today, but just know that it's not the entire test. You do have 4 hours to take the test. You'll take it at a testing center. So to do that, you're going to go to psiexams.com to schedule your exam. Just know that you can take it at any of their testing centers where it says you're eligible to take it. They do also offer it in Ohio. Last time I checked, they were not offering the Indiana real estate exam on the weekends in Indiana, but they are offering it on weekends in Ohio. So I've had some people that have gone over and taken it there just because it worked better for them as far as whether it was childcare or because of their full-time job currently or something like that. So just know that you do have that option.
I actually took the exam on Saturday in off of Meridian.
Oh, okay. Oh, so they've changed it.
Yeah.
Then. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good.
So they are offering them in Carmel on Saturdays.
Okay. Yeah. Because for a while there, they weren't, which is why I had it on this slide. So that's good though. But I've also had some people that maybe time was booked and they really wanted to do it. So that's what they did. Like when I did mine, I drove to Terre Haute to take it because they were backed up like 2 or 3 weeks here. And I was like, I don't have 2 or 3 weeks to wait. So little backstory on me. I one day just quit my job, which I don't recommend to people at all. But it was one of those, I knew I could make a phone call, have another restaurant management job or 2 in that same day. And I was like, I don't know. So I kind of waited for a little bit and ultimately made the decision that real estate is where I was going to go into. So then I took my class. I did it because I had nothing else to do with my life. I think I finished my 90-hour course in 2.5 weeks. But that's all I had to do. I just sat on my computer and studied and learned, took my test and started the next day. So that's how that worked. But in the testing center, you can't take anything in with you, but they will provide you with a calculator. And they typically will provide you, I think more often than not, it's like a small dry erase board, maybe a pencil and paper. One thing I have heard from some people is that those few key things that they wanted to make sure they didn't forget, as soon as they got into the testing center, they wrote those down. So it could be formulas, it could be how many square feet are in an acre. Whatever things they didn't want to forget, they would just write those down real quick so it was on paper and could get out of their brain. They do also offer a remote proctoring option, which I have not heard much very many good things about that. Typically from what I've heard from people is that, they sit and wait for a proctor for sometimes over an hour, and then just the whole process, and never fails that at some point during that exam, your internet goes down or something like that, and then you have to start over. So again, it's another thing that can cause anxiety for people. So, you easily get anxiety over testing, then do it in person. It's going to be better for you. And then the last 3 I have for you are be rested, eat a snack before you go, and don't rush, because again, you have 4 hours to take your test. So here's an additional study resource that I have for you, and it's a website called CompuCram.com. Now, just a disclaimer, I don't have any affiliation with them. I don't receive compensation, anything like that. But it was what I used to help me study for my exam. If you want help with just the state portion, it's $49. If it's state national, it's $89. I have a screenshot of it here on my next slide. And they typically will have some sort of a discount code on there as well. What I really liked about it was they first give you a pre-test to determine what areas that you're doing well in and what areas you need some improvement on. And then from there, in the areas where you need some improvement, they're going to do flashcards, quizzes, give you some more study materials, and kind of help guide you through that. And then they're going to say, okay, you're ready to take some practice tests, and you can take as many as you want. And the system will tell you when you're ready to go and take the exam. So I think I did 5 practice exams. And until I was scoring in the low 90s, I felt like, I could then go and score somewhere in the 80s when I go and take it in person. So that was very helpful to me. Here's just a screenshot of their website. Again, it's CompuCram.com. So yeah, it's like you see here on the bottom, they have a discount code through there. So if that's something that helps you, great. Again, everyone learns differently, studies differently, and but if that works for you, great. Any questions so far? All right, so the question is, what if I don't pass the test? Well, retake it. And if you pass one part but not the other, you only have to retake the part that you didn't pass. Not everyone passes the first time. And I also tells people your test score doesn't dictate what kind of an agent you're going to be. Nobody ever asks you, how many times did you take your real estate exam? And I've got one agent that she took it was 7 or 8 times. And it was more just because she just doesn't test well. But she's a really great agent, and she's very successful at, taking care of her clients and finding clients and doing those things. So again, it's just that hurdle to get into real estate that you have to pass. But again, that's not going to dictate what kind of an agent you're going to be. So then what happens after you pass your test? And so these are some of the things they don't teach, depending on who you talk to beforehand. They don't always tell you all the expenses going into it, but I'm always very upfront about it with everybody because it's not cheap to get into real estate. But you're going to apply for your license with the Indiana Professional Licensing Agency. The cost on that is $60. They do have on their website saying that it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks to process your license application. Right now we're seeing it's much closer to 2. But they aren't, for a while there, it was if you went down and you applied for your license, they usually had it active either that day or the next day. I think they've got some staffing challenges, or they've changed processes. So it's just taking longer. They also handle licenses for all sorts of trades. So it can be cosmetology, funeral directors, that. So they're processing licenses for the entire state. But just know that they say 4 to 6 weeks. I've seen it's been taking about 2 weeks. So there's that. Then part of that process is when you'll affiliate with a brokerage. You don't necessarily have to when you apply for your license, but it's easier if you do that all at the same time. And then from there, you're going to join MyBor, or in Ryan's case, you would join BBOR. And so for MyBor, again, the fees are prorated depending on when you join. It typically is somewhere between $1,200 and $1,600. I don't know for sure for Bloomington, just because it's a different board. I think they pay some of that monthly, and hopefully they've gone through that with you.
I've talked to Alice quite a bit.
Okay. I love Alice. Alice is one of my favorite people. So I'll be down. Actually, I'm going to be down in Bloomington next Tuesday doing a training session. So I'll be down there in that office that day. So yeah. All right. So the next question is, what brokerage is best for you? Now, if you look at the third one there, it says Century 21 Sheets may not be the best brokerage for you. And I just tell people that up front. I would like to think that that we are, I mean, I know we are a great brokerage, but again, we're not the right brokerage for everybody. My advice, and this is the advice that I received from a friend of mine before I got into real estate. And I said, Nick, I said, I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. So his advice was, if you're going to do it full time. He said, second, he said, go and work for a large brokerage first. He said, you might find he said, go and work there for 2 years. He said, for a couple of reasons. He said, one, they're going to have the training programs that you need to be successful. They'll have the support, they'll have networking, they'll have all of those things that you need to get a good foundation for the start of your career. He said, then at 2 years, you can decide what's best for you. He said, maybe you want to go and work for a small boutique brokerage. Maybe you want to start your own brokerage, or maybe you like what they have to offer and that's the right fit for you. And so you stay with a large brokerage. And he told me up front, he said, listen, he said, commission splits aren't everything. He said, some brokerages, that's all they talk about. That's their selling point is, we've got really great commission splits, but you got to look at what's on the back end of that. What do you get? For that, and how are you going to be successful? So the things that are, in my opinion, are going to help you be successful is training, coaching, and the support that you get in your office and from the company. So, and we can get into more details if you want to talk to someone as far as our training program. I do lead that. So we do a new agent training program every month. It's a total of 8 days over 2 weeks. Know that each of our managers are non-competing. So while we do sell, we're not out actively, trying to get business. We're never going to be the top producers in our offices because, again, our job as managers is to be there to support our agents, and not out looking for that next deal. And then again, all the support that we have from the office side of things. Again, other brokerages are going to sell on commission splits. They're going to sell on, all of the leads that they're going to provide to you. They do a lot of times they'll have competing managers or managers that are competing against you. But again, like I said, we may not be the best brokerage for you. We'd love to talk to each and every person out there. But again, we're not the right one for everyone, but talk to more than one brokerage and find the one that fits you best. And that's the best piece of advice that I can have for you. So questions on that? Looks like we've had maybe one other person join. So Chastity, if you could get signed in, please. I think you're the only new one. So I'll give you just a second. You can either scan the QR code or go to that link that's on there. So the other thing that will happen is you actually, once you sign in, you'll get an email that has a link to the playlist. So I record most of these sessions, and the questions vary from week to week or from session to session. Not always. So if you look at last month's session or the last session that I did, a lot of the same questions are in there. But there are other sessions that you can watch and learn from on there. Sorry. All right. So does anybody have any questions before we jump into some sample questions? And what we've done is we've gotten a sample of the state and the national exam, and we've just kind of pulled some questions from there that we can go through, and it'll give you an idea of what some of the questions look like. It'll give us an opportunity to talk through some concepts, talk through some things to help you remember. Like, so when it comes to fair housing, how do you remember what are the protected classes under the federal fair housing law? So we'll talk through some of that. Does anybody have any specific questions on anything before we get started? No? Okay. So again, the way this works best is if we'll go through and questions will come up. I'll read through them. I'll read through the answers and then come off mute. Give me what you think your answer is, and we'll kind of talk through it. And that works better than putting things in the chat, just because I have a hard time focusing on the questions and the video and the chat all at the same time. So that's just the way my brain works. All right, so let's move forward. All right, so Amira's seller, Tom, just received the news that his buyers are walking away from the sale. They weren't willing to proceed after they saw the inspection report. Neither Amira nor Tom has requested a copy of the report. What's the most likely reason for that? A, Amira doesn't trust this particular inspection company. B, if they see the report, they'll be required to disclose any adverse findings. C, they are unwilling to pay for the report as their buyer requires. Or D, Tom wants to pay for his own inspector so that he can question the inspector.
I think B.
Correct, B. If they see the report, they'll be required to disclose any adverse findings. So yeah, so that's why if I'm Tom or Amira, I'm like, I don't need it. It's fine. Because again, because of disclosure laws, you would have to disclose those things. All right, next question. According to the Department of Justice, an agreement between competitors to establish or adhere to uniform price discounts is a type of which antitrust violation? Is this A, group boycotting, B, market allocation, C, price fixing, or D, tie-in arrangement?
C, price fixing.
That's correct, price fixing. Right. Which of these is not an example of a group boycott? Acme Realty offers discounted services. Behringer Realty and Hawthorne Real Estate Group decide not to show any of Acme's listings and to prohibit showings to Acme buyers so they can drive Acme out of business. B, Deb, a licensee, is unhappy with the marketing materials a local company produced. She shares her concerns with Irving, a colleague, and they agree to avoid doing business with this company and to share the news with other colleagues. C, Sean and the associated brokers in his firm agree to purchase their marketing materials from a single supplier so they get a quantity discount. Or D, several brokerages in a certain area agree to stop running advertisements in a local publication. So which one of these is not an example of a group boycott?
C.
Correct. C. Sean and the associated brokers in his firm agree to purchase their marketing materials from a single supplier so they get a quantity discount. So they're not boycotting anything. They're just coming together and saying, hey, let's work, let's all buy from here so we get a better price. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. All right. Yasmin listed a house at a 6% commission rate, and it just sold for $463,500. Her brokerage and the buyer's agent's brokerage split the commission equally between them. Then Yasmin, who has a 60-40 commission split with her broker, Yasmin gets the higher split, took her check to the bank. How much did Yasmin earn from this transaction? So who wants to walk me through how to do this?
I can.
Okay.
So the selling price of 463,500 would be times 0.06 as you take that percentage and turn it into a decimal.
Okay.
Came out to greater than 27,000.
Okay.
Then you divide that number by 2 because it's split equally between the selling and buyer's agent.
Okay.
Which gave you a number around 13,000.
Okay.
And then you divide that or take that times 0.6 for the 60%. Again, converting the percentage to a decimal comes out to $8,343. Letter C.
Perfect. Absolutely. Did you read this question before?
And I read it as you brought it up on the screen.
I'm just teasing you. All right, so yeah, so here's the calculation. So it's $463,500 times 0.06 gives you your total commission of $27,810. Divide that by 2 and you get $13,905. And then if you do your percentages, 60%, which is 8343, is going to go to the agent, and 40%, 5562, is going to go to the brokerage. All right, so Justin decided to build a privacy fence around his yard. He thought the fence was along the property line, but it turns out he built it 1 foot inside his neighbor's property. What will an inspector document as existing on the neighboring property? Is this an easement, eminent domain, encroachment, or necessity?
Encroachment.
Correct. That's C, an encroachment. And you don't find them a ton out there. But I did so I had some buyers that closed on a property on Friday. And when we got the title work back, so this house was in South Broad Ripple in Sobro, and we got the surveyor location report back. And so it shows that, again, so the houses are right next to each other, and their house is kind of a tall and has a short driveway, 1-car garage, and there's a nice long driveway right next to the house. Well, that driveway actually belongs to my buyers. But the way it's set up and built and everything, that it's being solely used by the neighbor, which happened to also be the guy who built the house and sold it to him, but that's another story. So there was an easement recorded before, which is a shared driveway agreement, which allowed them to do it. Well, we had to change that just because it's not a shared driveway anymore. And so now it is an encroachment, but they have an agreement, it's called a consent to encroach, that basically gives that neighbor the right to use that part of my client's property as the driveway, so long as it's being maintained as a driveway, and he's got to maintain it and all of those things. So a lot of fun things out there in real estate. But so yes, long answer to this question is that is an encroachment. All right, so which of the following would be a violation of license law? A, offering a free home warranty to home buyers and disclosing that to all parties to the transaction. B, acting as broker and disclosed principal in a transaction. C, acting as agent for both buyer and seller in the same transaction with the expressed oral consent of both. Or D, offering part of the listing commission to cooperating brokers.
D.
You said B?
No, D.
Oh,
D
D.
is in the dog.
Okay. Does anybody else have any? Okay.
I think C. I say C because when you are acting as an agent for both buyer and seller, I think you have to fully disclose it. It must be in writing for them to agree. I don't think it could be an express oral consent.
That is correct. So it has to be written consent. So the answer is C. Now let's talk about D real quick. So offering part of the listing commission to cooperating brokers. And that's what we do every day. So in that, like in the example before with Yasmin, the listing brokerage received a 6% commission, but they split that 50-50 with the other agent. So the answer is that it is C. It has to be written.
Got it.
All righty. Another one. Which of the following would be a violation of license law? A, to give an opinion of value that a seller relies upon. B, to complete a sales contract for a purchaser. C, to act as a limited agent in a real estate transaction. Or D, to assure a buyer that a property will go up in value.
He is in dog.
Correct. So you can't assure a buyer that a property will go up in value because, again, we're not psychics. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can show them what has happened in the past and what those trends are. Now, notice here, so if you look at C just says to act as a limited agent in a real estate transaction. And you absolutely can. It has to be with the express written consent. But since they didn't put anything either way, then you don't know. So that one you're looking at, you're like, well, yes, you can act as a limited agent in a real estate transaction. And it's that asterisk that just pops in your head that as long as it's written consent by both parties. All right, next one. So should a licensee wish to purchase property from a private owner, the licensee A is required to disclose the licensee's true estimate of market value. B, must try to market the property prior to making an offer. C, required to disclose that they are a licensed agent. Or D, must tell the seller if the property appears underpriced.
So
Is it C?
B,
I've heard C and B or C and D. Did
I
anyone?
said C,
You
C, but
said-
I heard another letter as well, but I think it's C.
Yes.
I agree. I think it's C as well.
Yeah, it is C. So in any time you're, you want to buy or sell property as a licensed agent, you just have to disclose that. So in Indiana, on the purchase agreement, there's a line on there that says, seller holds a valid Indiana real estate license number blank. And there could be a time where you, as an agent, are helping to sell a property for somebody else that may happen to be licensed. They just choose, maybe their license is in referral and they're not, actively selling. So, because I've sold one property for a licensed agent before, just because she was moving out of state and that sort of thing. So, yep, you just have to disclose that. All right. Indiana advertising regulations would be violated if a licensee, A, places an advertisement for a listed property under her managing broker's name, but fails to include her own. B, places an ad for real property services that include only her name, license number, and phone number. C, places an advertisement for real property services that fails to disclose the fees associated with those services. Or D, does not place a for sale sign on a listed property.
B as in boy.
Yep, it is B. So what do you have to also do if you're doing any sort of advertising?
You have to have your firm. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you're good.
You have to include the managing broker's name have to be larger than your personal name. So that's always have to be
It doesn't necessarily have to be larger, but it just has to have. It does have to have your brokerage information in there. So in any advertising that, and any of our agents do, it just has to have Century 21 sheets listed on there. Now they do also have, so if it's, say you're doing something on Twitter or Instagram, it just has to be within one click, very obvious that you are a real estate agent and what brokerage you work for.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So when real estate licensee Brian discovered that real estate licensee Arnold was using a choose your neighbor letter to market a property without also listing the property in the MLS, in the local paper, or even putting a for sale sign in the yard, what charge could he bring against Arnold to the National Association of Realtors? Is this a charge of agreeing to discriminate by limiting access to the property? A charge of misrepresenting the property for sale? A charge of not fulfilling his fiduciary duties to his client by not conducting a complete marketing plan? Or a charge of unfair practice because his mother did not get one of the choose your neighbor letters? Any thoughts?
So I have it as A and D.
Okay, and tell me why you're between those two.
Well, so it is a charge of agreeing to discriminate by limiting access to the property because the choose your neighbor letter,
Mhm.
depending on where the mother lives, didn't get a letter
Okay,
from that. So because it's not an MLS, there's no for sale sign or local paper. Only those that received the letter would have access to the property.
right. Yeah, so, and the answer is A, the first one. Realtor Brian could charge Arnold with violating Article 10 of the Code of Ethics, which prohibits realtors from agreeing to discriminate against people belonging to a protected class. And really what it comes down to is, who are those letters going to? Did it just go to the people in the neighborhood and say, hey, you choose who you want to live in this neighborhood? And that's where that discrimination comes into play, because again, it's not available for anybody and everybody to come and take a look at that property. All right, so when property with a pre-existing lease is sold, the new owner, A, doesn't have to honor the lease unless it's recorded. B, isn't obligated by the terms of that lease. C, must give the tenants at least 30 days to vacate. Or D, must honor the lease terms unless the lease states otherwise.
D is in dog.
Correct. D is in dog. Oftentimes I'll see online, oh, help, my landlord is selling the house and, it's told us we've got to move out in 30 days or whatever. And my first question to those people is always, do you have a written lease? Unfortunately, a lot of times they don't. They're like, well, we're month to month now. Oh, well, then, yeah, you got a month to get out. But, so say that they had just signed a 2-year lease and then the owner decided he was going to sell. The next owner is obligated to the terms of those lease. So if it says that, the rent is, $300 a month, then the new landlord can't come in and say, well, I'm raising your rent to $1,000 a month. He can't do it. He's got to follow exactly what that lease says until that lease expires. All right, Sam and Bridget are cousins who jointly own property. They are both named on the deed. They received title at the same time. They have the right of survivorship, and they each have equal interest and undivided rights of possession. What type of ownership do they have? Is this A, tenancy in common, B, estate in severalty, C, joint tenancy, or D, tenancy by the entirety?
C, joint tenancy.
Correct. So this is the area that I struggled with the most. And I think, honestly, when I got to my exam, I just guessed because it always threw me off. But who can tell me what tenants in common would be?
Tenants in common would basically be where you still hold the undivided like interest in the property, but you can, with tenants in common, you can transfer that to your heirs, where joint tenancy is they have a right of survivorship. That's how I always remember it in my head, because that one is, to me, the forms of ownerships and the type of ownerships, that one I had to like really study like hard on, but that's how I remember it, and it works for me.
Exactly. So joint tenancy is typically how you'll see it is joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. So again, in this one, if Sam or Bridget dies, then it just goes to the other person. Who can tell me what estate in severalty is? This comes up in another question here in a little bit. Anyone?
Just the one owner?
No, actually, so an estate in severalty, you typically will have more than one owner, but what has happened is they have severed. And so when I see that severalty, I think of the word severed, some of the rights. So for example, you're in Texas or Oklahoma. And so you go and you see a nice big farm field, and the farmer's got cows out there and they're grazing and whatever. And then you have the oil derricks. Well, oftentimes what happens is the oil company has come in and bought the mineral rights to that land. So now they own that property in severalty. So the oil company owns the mineral rights. The farmer actually owns the land. Or another place where this comes into play is sometimes in your large cities that people will sell the air rights. So the city or maybe a railroad company might own the land, but they've sold the air rights above it so that somebody could build a hotel or something like that. So while they still own the land, that hotel company owns the air above that land, which is how they're able to then build their hotel or whatever it is that they're building. So that is a state in severalty. And then who can tell me what tenancy by the entirety is?
For married couples.
Yeah. So typically you'll see on the deed, you're going to see as husband and wife. But in the case of same-sex couples, they typically will just put it as tenants by the entirety. But it's the same concept. It's just you can't put husband and wife on a deed if it's two men or two women, and they don't use husband and husband or wife and wife. So, all right, enough about ways to take title. All right, so Marcus listed his property with Home Sweet Home Realty and one of its listing agents, Ron Savage. About a month later, Ron filed for bankruptcy. Which of the following statements about this situation is true? A, bankruptcy has no impact on agency agreements. B, Marcus can choose whether or not to continue the listing agreement with Ron. C, the agency agreement is terminated because the agent filed for bankruptcy. Or D, the agency agreement only terminates if the broker or the principal declares bankruptcy. Thoughts? All right, so let me ask you this. In a listing contract, who's the listing contract between?
The broker, the managing broker, and the client, the principal.
Correct. So it's between the brokerage and the seller in this case. So the agreement isn't between the broker or between the seller and Ron, the agent, correct?
Right.
All right. So just because Ron, the agent, declares bankruptcy doesn't have any effect on that agreement at all, right?
Right.
All right. So now what answer do we think it might be?
A.
It's actually D. So now if the brokerage or the principal declares bankruptcy, that can terminate that listing agreement. But that's the only thing that would terminate it. Just because Marcus the agent did, I'm sorry, just because Ron the agent filed bankruptcy has no effect on it. All right. What type of loan is neither guaranteed nor insured by government agencies? Is it A, conventional, B, Federal Housing Administration or FHA, C, U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, or D, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, VA?
Conventional.
A.
Correct. It's A, conventional. Who can tell me for a first-time homebuyer, what is the minimum down payment on a conventional loan?
3%.
Correct. Yes, it's 3%. What is the minimum down payment for an FHA loan?
0%.
Nope. Laura?
I have no idea.
Okay. So conventional is 3%. FHA is 3.5%. What is the minimum down payment for a USDA loan? It's 0%.
I think that one may be 0%.
Yeah, USDA is 0%. And what about VA loans?
VA can also be all the way down.
Right. VA is also 0%. So the main ones you need to know, you need to know that VA and USDA are 0% down payment loans. Now, that does not mean that your client doesn't have to bring any money to closing, because there are still closing costs that are involved in that process for any of them. But 0% for VA and USDA, 3.5% for FHA, and 3% for conventional. So we won't get too deep into the different loan types. That's a great conversation for your client to have with their loan officer. And again, because there might be a loan product that's better for, your buyer in because of a particular situation that they're in. VA loans are really awesome because they're very permissive as far as debt to income ratio. If the service member has, and they have to be a qualified veteran, there are some rules around that. But if they have any sort of service related disability of 10% or more, then they have no funding fee. And the VA also protects them in some things as far as like if, the market goes down and they have to move, that they're going to cover a certain percentage of, the value of their home. And I think it's like 10%. So say you bought a house for 300,000 and now you have to move and you can only sell it for 280. You're not going to take a loss on that. The VA is going to cover that. So there's some really cool things to it, but the things to know: conventional 3%, FHA 3.5%. All right, a buyer, math. A buyer is purchasing a property for $500,000. He has a down payment of $50,000 and is financing the rest. What's the amount of the loan origination fee if the lender charges 1.5 points? So how would you figure this one out?
I don't know if this is correct or not, but I know with the when it comes to the points, 1 point equals 1%. So with 1.5 point, you would assume that that's 1.5%.
Okay.
And then he said the buyer is purchasing property for $50,000, and he has a down payment of $50,000. So that way, $450,000 would be the part that he's financing. So I would assume that you would take 450,000 times 1.5% to
Correct.
get your answer.
Yeah. So 1 point is one. What is it? Oh yeah. So we know that the total amount's $500,000. The amount being financed is $450,000, and 1 point is 1% of the amount financed. So in this case, it'd be 1.5 points equals 1.5% of the amount financed. And so when you do the math, it is $6,750. All right, a duplex produces a monthly gross rental income of $1,800. The GRM and appraiser extracts from the local market is $125. Calculate the property's estimated value. Who can tell me what GRM stands for?
Gross rent multiplier?
Yep, gross rent multiplier. All right, so now with the information we have here, how do you figure out the property's estimated value?
I didn't say that.
So all you have to do is multiply your 1,800 by 125. And I don't have my calculator on me. I think it ends up being 225, I think is what it is.
That's 225.
Okay. Yeah. So here's where they'll try to trip you up in some questions, because they're going to give you the same scenario, but it might read something like a duplex produces a monthly gross rental income of $1,800. The landlord has monthly expenses of $400. The GRM that an appraiser extracts from the local market is $125. Calculate the property's estimated value. So they've given you some other information in there, but it has no bearing on this question whatsoever. So that's where it's, look at, okay, what are we trying to figure out and how do we figure it out? So in this one, even though they gave us other information, it doesn't matter, because what we're looking at is gross rent times that gross rent multiplier, not a net rent or not income, not net income or anything like that. So just be watching for that, because you will get that sometimes.
So we only need the gross rent and then the gross rent multiplier to be able to answer the question. Anything else is just like extra information.
Yep. And they will do that. Sometimes they will put extra information in there just to throw you off. So
why do they do that? It's so harsh.
I know. Well, they want to know if you're paying attention.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there are a couple others you'll see where they have some kind of extraneous information in there. I think we've got a few more questions like that, but it happens. But yeah, they're just trying to see if you're paying attention. All right, so Allison and Brent are financing their house purchase of $232,500 with an FHA loan. Their credit score qualifies them for the minimum down payment. What do they need to put down? I think it gives, is it $10,462.50, $11,625, $6,975, or $8,137.50?
D.
D.
Okay, and how did you calculate that?
So I did 232,500, which is the purchase price, and then divided that by the 3.5% for the FHA loan.
Yep. Perfect. So yeah, and the key here is it's an FHA loan, and the minimum down payment on an FHA loan is 3.5%. So yeah, there's the answer. All right. Regina purchases a farm with 80 acres and owns her property in severalty. What does this mean for the company that purchased the mineral rights from the previous owner? A, Regina and the company that purchased the mineral rights are automatically tenants in common since they share ownership of the property. B, Regina didn't purchase the mineral rights, which have been severed from the property by the previous owner. C, Regina included the mineral rights in her purchase agreement since she could not otherwise own the property in severalty. Or D, Regina is the sole owner and the company must accept a fractional portion of the sales price in return for forfeiting the mineral rights.
B.
B. And why did you come up with that answer?
Because they were already removed from the property from the previous owner.
Yep, it was severed. Yeah, those rights were severed. Yep. So perfect. All right. Real estate licensee William is preparing a sale agreement that will include an unusual circumstance. What's his best course of action? A, consult an attorney. B, create his own forms. C, use an existing form and write an addendum that covers the unusual circumstance. Or D, use existing forms but modify the language to address the unusual circumstance.
Consult an attorney.
Perfect. Yes, we are not attorneys, and so if it's an unusual circumstance, best thing is to consult an attorney. Now they may say, "Oh no, you can use this form. This is how I would put that on there," but you don't want to just be doing that. Otherwise, you could be charged with the unlawful practice of law, or unauthorized practice of law. I think is what we call it. Okay. So which of these situations would a listing be most likely to terminate due to the listing agreement expiration? Is this A, a market with high inventory and low demand? B, a market with low inventory and high demand? C, a moderately priced home in a neighborhood slated for renewal? Or D, a moderately priced home sold as is in a market full of investors?
A.
Correct. High inventory and low demand. We are definitely not in that market right now. We are in B. We have a very low inventory and a lot of demand for homes. So, now is an interesting. Oh, do you have a question?
Sorry, I was going to ask if you can explain that one because I didn't know that. I guess what supply and demand that could terminate the listing agreement.
Sure.
Or I guess because it expired.
Yeah. So, so if you have a lot of inventory, so we'll just say, for example, we have 1,000 homes on the market, but we only have 100 people that are really out there looking for homes right now. Then there's a good chance that listing agreement, and it might be 6 months long, but that listing agreement might expire because there just weren't enough buyers out there looking for homes. So, and like I said, right now we're in the opposite. We've got very few homes on the market and a lot of people that want them. I had these most recent buyers I worked with that just closed. One of the first houses we put an offer in on, they were one of 42 offers. The house ended up selling for $60,000 over the list price. And we're not talking like, $1 million home. The house is listed at 275 and closed at 335 up on the northeast side of town. So tons and tons of demand and people that want homes, but they're not finding them. So right now we don't see a lot of expired listings either. Very few, but there are some for certain reasons.
Thank you. That makes sense. It
All
requires
right.
you to think about the question for sure.
Yeah. All right. So regarding sub-agency in the state of Indiana, a brokerage firm A must disclose this through the MLS/BLC. B may offer it only if the buyer and seller agree in writing. C may offer it only if the fees charged to all parties are equal, or D may not offer it under any circumstances.
In Indiana, it is D. May not offer it under any circumstances.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's a no-go. All right. Which of the following needs to be licensed to sell real estate? A county assessor. B, the executrix of an estate paid a fee to sell a decedent's home. C, a neighbor helping sell a property in exchange for use of a timeshare in Florida. Or D, an auctioneer.
C.
Which one?
C is in cat.
Correct.
Right.
So even though the neighbor's not getting quote unquote paid, they are receiving something of monetary value for selling real estate. So in order to do that, they would need to be licensed to sell. All right, so a broker associate may do which of the following? A, maintain their own escrow account. B, advertise in their own name without the name of the firm. C, maintain a separate office and signage at their home. Or D, only operate under the oversight of their managing broker.
D.
D, correct. Yeah, they can only operate under the oversight of their managing broker. All right, next, a licensee can lose his or her license for which of the following? A, allowing funds to be deposited into an interest-bearing escrow account. B, paying a commission to an unlicensed person. C, acting as a disclosed limited agent in a real estate transaction. Or D, charging a commission rate higher than the real estate commission allows. Any thoughts?
D. D is in dog.
Nope. So there is no set commission rate from the real estate commission or really from anybody.
B.
B, yeah. I say B.
You cannot pay a commission to an unlicensed person, which is also why you can't go and advertise, on publicly and say, hey, if you send, people to me and if they buy a house, I'm going to give you a referral fee of $500. Unless they're a licensed agent, you can't do that. So they have to be licensed in order for you to pay them any sort of commission or referral fee. All right, if a property is deemed to be psychologically affected, the listing agent, A, must disclose this fact and the nature of the affectation to all parties. B, must disclose this fact to prospective buyers. C, may not intentionally misrepresent a fact in response to a direct question. Or D, has no obligation one way or the other because psychological affectations are not considered to be physical defects. So before we get to the answer, who can tell me there are 3 things in the state of Indiana that qualifies a property as being psychologically affected? Who can give me one?
I think drugs.
What about drugs?
Like the sale of drugs.
Possibly. Elaborate a little more. You're like, I don't know. Huh?
Dealing drugs.
Not necessarily. So we'll get back to that though. Who else can give me one?
If a person dies or commits suicide in the home.
Right. So if somebody died on the property, it could be suicide, could be homicide, could be any sort of death It could be natural causes as well. What else?
I think when she was saying drugs, like it had to been like some type of like gang activity where there was like a nuisance that was involved, and
Yeah,
maybe
so-
law enforcement.
Yeah, I think they list it as like major crimes. So and it could be a major crime, it was kind of well known, but maybe didn't involve death. So it could be, a hostage situation. It could be, again, major crimes. Like if that was where, everybody knew that there was a big drug bust there, things like that, that could cause it to be psychologically
Okay.
affected. The third one?
Paranormal activity.
No, no, not paranormal activity. Ghosts are not, you don't, ghost is not a psychological affectation. It is if somebody was living in a house with HIV. Again, how would you necessarily know that? You may not. But, all right, so now we got to get to the answer to the question. Is it A, B, C, or D?
Stick them as D.
That is correct.
D is correct.
D is not correct.
Oh, I think
The
C.
answer is C. So if a property is deemed to be psychologically affected, the listing agent may not intentionally misrepresent a fact in response to a direct question. So if, in fact, I know that, and we'll use a real life example, my next door neighbor died in the house. He died of cancer. It was natural causes. So, but he died in the house. So if, and I was supposed to sell his house, I'm a little salty because I didn't. His son ended up moving in. He's a nice guy. And then when his son sold it, didn't use me. I'm not salty about that either, but that's okay. Now, if somebody had asked me, did somebody die in the house? And because I knew that he had, I would have to tell them yes. But if they don't ask me, I'm not required to tell them. And I'm also probably not going to put in the property description, if it was, say, a house where, maybe there was a triple homicide or something like that. I'm not going to put in the property description, this is the scene of the 1998 triple homicide, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to put it there. But if somebody asks me and I know, I have to tell them the truth. And that's for anything regarding a psychologically affected property. Any other questions on that subject? All right. So when acting as a limited agent, a licensee has certain limitations as to how they should conduct themselves. Which of the following would be a violation of those limitations? A, giving the buyers information about other homes that have sold in the area. B, refusing to tell the buyer why the seller is selling. C, failing to tell the seller that the buyer would probably pay more than they have offered. Or D, telling the buyer that in your opinion, the property is overpriced and the seller would probably take less. So which of the following would be a violation of those limitations?
D.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, you can't tell the buyer that in your opinion, the property is overpriced and the seller would probably take less because you already know those things. You and the seller may have already had that conversation as far as what they would take, et cetera. So you can't share that information. Your responsibility at that point is, your loyalty and everything is really to the transaction and not to either side. You're just going to act as kind of that intermediary. They've got to make those determinations as far as like offer price, counter offer. When you get into inspection responses, it can be tricky. It can be done, and as long as you know your limitations up front, it, like I said, it can absolutely be done, and you can represent both sides of the transaction. But it can also be tricky. So, and that's something that you and your sales manager might talk through, on a property. So, because I've had some where I've just referred the other side out to somebody else just to make things easier on both sides. All right. So in the state of Indiana, net listings, A, are not legal. B, require the written consent of all parties. C, must state the maximum fee. Or D, must not allow the broker to net more than the seller.
C.
Nope.
What is a net listing? I guess I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so a net listing is so as an example to where the seller says to the agent, hey, as long as you can get me $200,000 for my house, anything above that you get to keep as your commission. So that's what a net
I
listing
think A.
That is correct. So in Indiana, it is not legal. And really from a consumer protection standpoint, because if I am maybe a slightly dishonest agent, and somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to sell my property. What do you think it's worth? And you give them a number and maybe you say $150,000. And they say, okay, well, great. Well, anything you get over 150,000, you get to keep as your commission. Well, I knew the house was worth 250. I just told them it was 150. So we go and we sell it. We sell it for 250. They only get 150 for their house. I get $100,000. Great for me, not good for the seller. So in Indiana, net listings are not legal. All right, next one. Ooh, math. A seller received $800,000 for a 5.5-acre rectangular parcel alongside a road frontage. The property is 400 feet deep. What was the price per front foot of the property? Is it $2,000, $363.64, $598.95, or $1,335.60? How are you going to figure this one out?
Sorry, I had to go back to the last question. I was looking at my my notes for the Indiana rules. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit where, because I see something that says note that Indiana does allow a net listing, but it must state the maximum commission to be paid. Is that not the same as the fee?
Yeah, but
because I'm looking in the the Indiana rules and regulations under, I don't know what section it's under, but it's like in like kind of at the bottom where it says Indiana does allow a net listing, but it must state the maximum commission to be paid rather than an open-ended statement that broker gets whatever is left over. Also, most courts would prohibit any fee that is beyond reasonable and customary. Bottom line, don't do net listings. Like, it's not recommended, but it's saying it's not legal. So that is, so they are not, they would be legal, right?
Let me look. I'll have to find something, but
Okay.
yeah, I didn't think that net listings were legal. It's going to take me too long to get through kind of where I was looking for it. I will get back to you on that one because I hope I don't have a wrong answer in here. So
okay, because this one always gets me like tripped up, and like I thought I saw it somewhere that it must state the maximum fee, and it could be one of those things where like they're saying fee instead of commission, so it could be one of those like the words are kind of like throwing you off.
right.
But it does say that Indiana they are legal, but it's not really frowned upon. Like it's frowned upon. But I have seen some things where they say it's not legal, but I do see some, like in the book it says that it is legal, but it must state the maximum commission.
Okay.
So I don't really know what that means.
I will double check. But I'm 99% certain that net listings are legal. And here's the other reason, I think that is because nowhere in any of our documents, so our listing contracts, nowhere is that language anywhere in there as far as being able to do a net listing. So I will double check and I will get back to you on it.
Okay, thank you.
Because like I said, everything I've ever studied, known, all of the forms, I've seen, and I spend a lot of time looking, through the forms, they just show a percentage. It shows either a percentage or a dollar amount, and it doesn't give that option. So I don't know. I will double check that one.
Okay.
All right. So let's go back to math. You were trying to avoid math, weren't you? Just teasing you. All right, so back to this one. A seller received $800,000 for a 5.5 acre rectangular parcel alongside a road frontage. The property is 400 feet deep. What was the price per front foot of the property? How are we going to figure this out? Or are we going to make a good guess and just move on? All right. So this is my suggestion would be to draw this one out because this is, again, it's math. We've got do a little bit of math here. So here are the things we know. We know at the top that they paid $800,000 for everything. We know, so if you look at this rectangle, that you're going to have your front feet, which we don't know. We do know how deep the property is, which is 400 feet. And we know we've got 5.5 acres. And the question they want to know is how many dollars per front foot. So once we know our front feet, then we can divide that into the dollars that we paid for the entire property. So you will calculate to, you're going to do 5.5 acres equals blank square feet, which is how many square feet are in an acre?
Is it the 43,560?
Yep. So so that's going to give us 239,580 square feet. Now, if you look at the area, so that 239,580 is your length times your width. Well, we know the width or the depth. So we're going to divide that by your 400, which gives you 598.95 front feet. Now, let's look back at the question real quick. So that 598.95 is one of the answers on here, but that's not the right answer. That's how many front feet we have, not what we paid per front foot, right? So then we need to divide the 800,000 by 598.95. And that gives you $1,335.67 per front foot. Guess how many times in residential real estate you need to make this calculation?
Zero.
Never. This is used commonly in commercial real estate, but in residential, we don't really ever use it. So, but you got to know it for the test. Any questions on that one? All right. So if individuals want to use their property in a way that's not permitted by a zoning ordinance, they must submit a request for a variance or special use permit to which of the following groups? Is it the Architectural Review Board, the Building Department, the Planning Board, or the Zoning Board of Appeals?
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Correct. Very good. All right. Ashish is purchasing a bank-owned property. His real estate agent tells him the bank is offering insurable, not marketable title. What does this mean to Ashish? A, insurable title has uncurable title defects, so Ashish terminates his contract. B, insurable title carries a higher standard of assurance than marketable title, so Ashish shouldn't be concerned. Or C, insurable title is one that may have known defects, but is still insurable. Ashish should carefully review the title policy.
C.
Correct. So there may be defects, but the title company is ensuring that if something comes up with whatever those defects are, that they are going to handle all of that situation. Now, Ashish should review that title policy to make sure that it states that in there so that if it does come up, he knows that he is covered on that. All right. Kevin and Regina sold their property to Vicky using a general warranty deed. Which of these statements is true? A, either Regina or Kevin can convey the property. B, Kevin and Regina are the grantees. C, Vicky is the grantee. Or D, Vicky is the grantor.
C.
Correct. So the person receiving is the one that's EE. The person giving is the OR. So Kevin and Regina are the grantors, and Vicky is the grantee. All right, so the Shores are in the process of buying a beautiful 3,000 square foot home from the Bishops. They've completed all the required paperwork on their loan application. Mary's analyzing the package to determine their ability to repay the loan. She examines the property's value, the property type, and the loan to value ratio, among other things. Her recommendation is that the Shores loan application be approved. What is Mary's role? Is this A, a member of the loan committee, B, the seller, C, the seller's real estate agent, or D, the underwriter?
D, the underwriter.
Correct. She is the underwriter. All right. So Tom and Roseanne are interested in a property, but before making an offer, they want to make sure there aren't any registered sex offenders living in the neighborhood. Which statement is most accurate? A, it's up to the buyers to perform due diligence and research whether sex offenders live in the area. B, licensees can direct clients to the state's registry. C, sex offender information is not public and the seller is not required to disclose it. D, the licensee must research the neighborhood to determine if there are any registered sex offenders. Or E, the seller must disclose the location of any nearby sex offenders. Which statement is most accurate? And I'll give you a hint. There's two that are accurate in here, but one's more accurate than the other.
It's A and B, with A being the most accurate.
Correct. So yes, licensees can, and we do direct clients to the state's registry in our purchase agreement. But ultimately, it is up to the buyer to perform due diligence and research whether sex offenders live in the area. We as agents can't be responsible for that because, again, what if we search in a 1 mile radius around the address, and for them, their comfort level is 10 miles around there. So that, or we search it today and tomorrow somebody registers and pops up on the registry. So again, we don't want to be held liable for that. So it is up to the buyer to do that due diligence.
I have a question.
Yes.
In that situation where there's two answers that could be, you could pick either or. For the PSI, how do they score the questions, I guess? Or do they do like whatever one is the most accurate is more points, or is just one answer is the only answer and that's it?
One answer is the only answer and that's it. So again, what you have to look at in this question is, yes, they are both correct, but as an agent, so you have to kind of put your agent hat on for the question, and which is ultimately like the right thing in that one. And there's another one. I'll probably skip through a couple questions to get to one that's kind of similar to that. But yeah, so let me see if I can find that one because it's coming up here in just a second. Oh no, we got to do this one first. Corinne is 68 years old and employed full-time. She's of Spanish descent, is raising her 12-year-old grandson, and lives with her partner, Catherine. She requires an accessible apartment because she uses a wheelchair. Under which of the following federally protected classes might Corinne be protected if she faces housing discrimination? Is it age, employment status, national origin, familial status, and sexual identity? Or age, race, familial status, sexual identity, and disability? National origin, sex, disability, and familial status? Or religion and disability? First question. Well, actually, we'll get to that here in a second. Does anybody know what the answer is?
I would assume C.
Yeah, I would
or
say
B.
C.
Okay. Ryan?
B, age, race, familial status, sexual identity, and disability.
Okay. Anyone have any thoughts on why it wouldn't be B?
They don't talk about religion in this one.
We don't know what her religion is.
Right.
We know
Sorry,
she's
we don't
of
know
Spanish
what
descent, but we don't know what her religion is. So there are the federal, and I know I said I don't like to put things in chat, but there's an acronym that I like to use to teach what the protected classes are in the federal fair housing law. So it's fresh corn. So it's familial status, race, sex, handicap, color, religion, national origin. So that is one that people often will put in. So like I said, obviously there's no E and no R, but fresh corn is how I remember the protected classes under the federal fair housing law. So if you look at the first one lists sexual identity. Sexual identity is not listed in really the first two. So it is not a federally protected class. Age is also not a federally protected class. And then if you look at the last one, it mentions religion, but we don't know what her religion is from what we have in this question. We know she's of Spanish descent, but again, we don't know anything about that. So the answer is C. So federal fair housing laws don't name age, employment status, or sexual identity as protected classes. Corinne would be protected if she experienced housing discrimination based on her national origin, sex, disability, or familial status. Questions on that one? Let's do two more and then we're almost out of time. Which of these situations does the Americans with Disabilities Act address? A, Marcus, a property manager, routinely dismisses rental applications from families with children under the age of 18. B, Meridian Apartments provides a gym and pool area for residents, but it's not accessible to residents who use wheelchairs. C, Metro agents hired an interpreter to assist Spanish-speaking clients with the real estate process. Or D, the Golden Gate Senior Housing Center has no exercise or activity center for its residents.
It is B, for the Disabilities Act.
Correct. So we're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there's not equal access for those with and without disabilities. And that's where that one comes into play. So if you look at D, the last one, there is equal access because there is no access for anyone. So that's always look at that one. All right. Well, here's the last one we're going to do. So Seth is a licensee working for a buyer, Brittany. Brittany wants to make sure the seller accepts her offer in a charming Cape Cod. So she tells Seth she wants to make a full price, non-contingent offer right away. How should Seth respond? I will tell you, in this market, all of these are good answers. However, there's still one that is ultimately how Seth should respond. A, I highly recommend a home inspection contingency with your offer to protect yourself in the event there are major defects with the house. B, since you love this house, this is the best way to make sure you get it. Let's write up the offer and send it over right now. C, your offer may be more attractive if we come in at $5,000 over the list price. Or D, your offer would be more attractive if it were all cash.
The answer for me is A.
Yeah, yeah, and that is correct. A, I highly recommend a home inspection contingency with your offer to protect yourself in the event there are major defects with the house. Ultimately, Seth's responsibility as the agent is to protect his client's best interest. So yes, while the others may be true, and especially in this market, you might want to offer $25,000 over the list price. But protecting your client is your number one job as an agent. So recommending that home inspection contingency. Now, Brittany could say, you know what, I'm good. I don't need one, in which case, I would have them sign another form that we have, which is home inspection waiver, which basically says, hey, I have encouraged you to get a home inspection. I have highly recommended it. You're choosing not to. And so you can't come back at me and say, hey, I didn't do my job. That's basically what that document says. So that is all that I have. Again, if you haven't signed in, please do so. But are there any other questions or anything I can help answer for you related to the exam or just real estate in general?
Are the questions like today kind of similar to the PSI questions or?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Other questions?
How often do you offer this?
So we offer it basically twice a month. Some months it ends up being 3. I think this month we end up doing it 3 times. You can always go, and I will put this in the chat too. It's c21sheets.com, and it's Cram for, I think it's Cram for your exam. I should probably double check that. Let me peek at it real quick just to make sure. Or here's the other thing. If you just go to c21sheets.com and go to the careers tab, when you go to the careers tab, there's a link on there, and there's a section in the careers tab for this. So all of the dates are on there. You can go in and register, and you can register anytime, and it will send you the actual link for it. So like I said, I typically do it twice a month. I think this month it ends up being 3 times just because of how things worked out. So I think the next one again is on the 29th, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to double check. I don't know. I schedule them all out and then I just show up for them. So hope this was helpful for you.
It was.
All right. Well, everyone have a great evening. Like I said, if you did sign in, you'll get a link to the playlist. And this video should be up shortly. I tried something new. I actually did this live on YouTube as well. So I think it's just going to save it automatically and be done. If not, I'll download it from Zoom and then upload it onto there. But like I said, I put those over there on YouTube for you as well. So that's all I have.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Have a great evening.
You too.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.